A billionaire whispered insults in Arabic to mock a black waitress, never imagining she'd understand every single word. What happened next cost him everything. The crystal chandeliers of Le Chateau glittered like frozen stars above the city's most exclusive restaurant. Marcus Auermann adjusted his custom Patek Philippe watch, worth more than most people's homes, and smirked at his business associates seated around the marble table. He'd just closed a deal worth $50 million, and tonight was his celebration. When the waitress approached their table, Marcus barely glanced up. She was young, black, and moved with quiet professionalism as she placed water glasses before each guest. Her name tag read Aisha. Ya Allah, hal yajibu an nadamal hadihi al-kidma, al-badiye. Marcus muttered to his colleague in Arabic, leaning back in his chair. My God, must we endure this slow service? His friend chuckled, responding in the same language. Hiya la tafa my shay. Hada huwa sabab wujudium huna. La yamlikan maharat hakikia. She doesn't understand anything. That's why they're here. They have no real skills. Marcus continued, emboldened by what he assumed was a language barrier. Anzar ilahada al-makan. Yajib and yajidu ashkaz akthar. Tawafik mai surat al-makan. Look at this place. They should find people more fitting with the establishment's image. The other men at the table exchanged knowing glances, some nodding in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus felt a surge of confidence. He was untouchable here, surrounded by wealth and power, speaking a language he believed created an invisible wall between him and the staff. He reached for his wine glass, taking a long sip of the $1,000 bottle he'd ordered without checking the price. Aisha continued her work, carefully arranging the silverware and ensuring each place setting was perfect. Her movements were graceful and deliberate, showing years of experience in fine dining service. She adjusted a fork that was slightly out of alignment, smoothed a wrinkle from the tablecloth, and made sure the candle centerpiece was positioned exactly right. Every action demonstrated pride in her work. Marcus watched her with thinly veiled disdain. Nathamanu ana ladeha al-kudra ala kairat kamat altam, he said with a cruel laugh. Do we think she even has the ability to read the menu? His colleagues joined in the laughter, though some looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. One of the men, trying to outdo Marcus, added his own comment. Rubama yajibu and natahadathabai booty, akthar hada tafam tala basit lilm. Perhaps we should speak more slowly, so she can understand a simple request for water. The mockery continued, each man trying to prove his superiority through cruelty disguised as humor. Aisha picked up the menus from the center of the table, her face remaining perfectly neutral. She'd worked in high-end establishments long enough to maintain composure under any circumstance. As she distributed the leather-bound menus to each guest, Marcus made another comment, this time about her uniform. Hada alze al-razmi la yumkin and yukfi nakas al-tarbiya, he sneered. Even formal attire cannot hide a lack of breeding. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of other wealthy patrons. Classical music played softly in the background, and the scent of expensive French cuisine wafted from the kitchen. Everything about Le Chateau screamed elegance and sophistication. Yet at this table, the atmosphere had turned toxic. Marcus leaned forward, warming to his subject, and began critiquing everything from Aisha's posture to the way she held the water pitcher. His business partner, a man named Richard, finally interrupted. Marcus, Perhaps we should focus on our celebration. But Marcus waved him off dismissively. He was on a roll now, feeling powerful and in control. He'd spent his whole life climbing social ladders, accumulating wealth, and learning languages to conduct business across continents. In his mind, this gave him the right to judge others, to determine their worth with a single glance. What Marcus failed to notice was the slight smile playing at the corners of Aisha's lips. It wasn't nervousness or submission. It was the quiet confidence of someone who knew something he didn't. She finished distributing the menus and stood at attention, her posture perfect, her expression professional. The moment of reckoning was approaching, though Marcus remained blissfully unaware that his carefully constructed evening was about to come crashing down around him. Aisha finished placing the last glass and straightened, her expression unchanged. Then in flawless, eloquent Arabic that silenced the entire table, she spoke. Sayyidi, kidmatuna laysat badiye. Nana nudamil mai, kolziya arbai karma. Wa by kusos al maharat, amal shahadatain. Wa defy al adab al arabi min jamiat al kahira. Wa krafai idarat alam al aldalia min Oxford. Sir, our service isn't slow. We treat every guest with dignity. And regarding skills, I hold 2 degrees. One in Arabic literature from Cairo University, and another in international business management from Oxford. The color drained from Marcus's face. His colleagues froze, glasses halfway to their lips. The surrounding tables had gone quiet, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Aisha continued, her voice steady and professional. Kama enani emal huna laces lianani la amstala kiarit. Bal lianani yumin bayan kulli, amal sharif yastek aliteram. She yabdu anaka lam, tata alamu biade. I work here not because I lack options, but because I believe every honest profession deserves respect. Something you apparently haven't learned yet. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt his heart pounding in his chest as the reality of the situation crashed over him like a wave. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked around the table desperately, hoping one of his associates would say something, anything, to break the tension. But they all avoided his gaze, suddenly fascinated by their menus or the pattern on their plates. Richard set down his wine glass carefully, the soft clink against the marble table sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet. He cleared his throat and looked at Aisha with genuine respect in his eyes. I apologize profusely for my colleague's behavior, he said, his voice thick with embarrassment. There is no excuse for such disrespect. Aisha acknowledged his apology with a slight nod, but her attention remained focused on Marcus. Her Arabic had been so perfect, so refined, that it was clear she hadn't just studied the language casually. She had mastered it at the highest academic level, understanding not just the words but the culture, the nuances, and the poetry embedded in every syllable. The dialect she used was classical and educated, the kind spoken by scholars and diplomats. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. I didn't know. I didn't realize. He trailed off, recognizing how pathetic his words sounded. There was no defense for what he'd said, no excuse that would make this right. Other diners in the restaurant were now openly watching the scene unfold. Some whispered to their companions, while others simply stared, witnessing a moment of pure justice being served. An elderly woman at a nearby table nodded approvingly at Aisha, having clearly heard enough to understand what had transpired. Aisha picked up the wine list from the table and held it with both hands, her professional demeanor never wavering. Ana fahimu al-lugha al-arabiyya, al-faransiyya, al-isbaniyya, wa al-italiyya, she said calmly. I understand Arabic, French, Spanish, and Italian. She paused, letting that sink in before adding, Hafida, kunda turid al-hadith ani, alayka and takana akthar ibduan faik tr al-lugha. So if you wish to talk about me, you'll need to be more creative in your choice of language. One of Marcus's colleagues, a younger man named David, actually laughed despite himself, then quickly covered his mouth. The absurdity of the situation was becoming clear to everyone. Here was Marcus Auermann, a man who prided himself on his international sophistication and business acumen, completely humiliated by a waitress he'd assumed was beneath him. Marcus felt sweat forming on his forehead. This wasn't just embarrassing, it was potentially devastating. In their world of high-stakes business and carefully maintained reputations, stories like this spread like wildfire. By tomorrow morning, everyone in their social and professional circles would know about the billionaire who got schooled by a server. The deals he'd worked so hard to secure could be jeopardized by this display of poor character. Aisha placed the wine list back on the table and clasped her hands in front of her. Now, gentlemen, she said, switching to perfect English, shall I give you a few moments to decide on your orders? Or would you prefer recommendations? I'm quite familiar with the chef's specialties this evening. Her tone was impeccably polite, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. She had made her point, and she had done so with grace and intelligence that Marcus could never have anticipated. The power dynamic at the table had completely reversed. Marcus, who had entered the restaurant as the king of his domain, now sat diminished and exposed. His $50 million deal suddenly fell hollow. All the money in the world couldn't buy back the dignity he'd just lost, and it certainly couldn't erase the truth that Aisha had revealed about his character. The restaurant manager, who had been watching from across the room, approached swiftly. But before he could speak, Aisha smiled politely at the table. Hal Turidin and Abda, by Takadim al-Tayyam, am Tutajan Ilam Mazid min al-Waqt. Would you like me to begin presenting your courses, or do you need more time? Marcus stammered, completely thrown off balance. His carefully constructed image of superiority had shattered in seconds. One of his associates, an Emirati businessman named Khalid, set down his menu with deliberate slowness. I must apologize for my colleague, Khalid said in English, his tone ice cold. His behavior does not represent our values or our business practices. Marcus tried to recover. I didn't mean, it was just a test. Aisha interjected calmly. That's what people usually claim when they're caught revealing their true character. She pulled out her notepad. Your reservation mentioned dietary restrictions. Shall we discuss those? Or would you prefer to continue your conversation in French, Hindi, perhaps Mandarin? The table sat in stunned silence. This wasn't just a multilingual waitress. This was someone who had deliberately allowed them to expose themselves while maintaining complete composure. The manager, a distinguished man in his 50s named Philippe, finally reached the table. He'd witnessed the entire exchange, and his expression showed both concern and a hint of pride in his employee. Gentlemen, is everything satisfactory? He asked, though the question carried weight beyond its simple words. He was giving them a chance to either apologize properly or leave. Khalid spoke before Marcus could respond. Everything is fine with the service, Philippe. In fact, Ms. Aisha here has been exceptionally professional under circumstances that would have justified a much harsher response. He turned to face Marcus directly, his dark eyes blazing with barely contained anger. You've embarrassed not just yourself, but all of us at this table. More importantly, you've insulted someone whose education clearly surpasses your manners. The other men at the table murmured in agreement, distancing themselves from Marcus's behavior. They were all calculating the damage to their own reputations by association. In the world of international business, word traveled fast, and nobody wanted to be known as the person who stood by while a colleague displayed such blatant disrespect. Marcus felt his face burning with shame and anger, mostly at himself, but also at being called out so publicly. He'd built his empire on reading people, on knowing when to be charming and when to be ruthless. How had he miscalculated so badly? He looked up at Aisha, really seeing her for the first time. Her eyes held intelligence and strength, but also something else. Disappointment, perhaps, that another person had proven themselves to be exactly what she'd probably expected. Please, Marcus finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. I sincerely apologize. There is no justification for what I said. I was arrogant and cruel, and I'm deeply sorry. The words felt inadequate even as he spoke them, but they were all he had. Aisha studied him for a moment, her pen poised above her notepad. Apology noted, she said neutrally. Though I accept it not for your sake, but because holding on to anger would only weigh me down. You'll have to live with what you've revealed about yourself tonight. She clicked her pen. Now, the chef has prepared a special tasting menu this evening. The first course is a seared scallop with saffron foam and microgreens, followed by... Richard interrupted gently. Before we continue, I think we all need to acknowledge something. He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. We come to places like this, and we forget that every person here, from the chef to the servers to the people who clean, they all have stories, education, dreams, and dignity. We've been reminded of that tonight in a way none of us will forget. David, the younger colleague, added quietly, my sister worked as a waitress while getting her medical degree. She's a surgeon now, but she still talks about how people treated her during those years. Like she was invisible, or worse, like she was less than human. He looked at Aisha with respect. Thank you for standing up for yourself. Not everyone has the courage or the opportunity to do that. Aisha's professional mask softened slightly. Your sister sounds like a remarkable woman. The world needs more people who understand that our worth isn't determined by our current circumstances, but by our character and how we treat others. She glanced at Marcus, then away. Some people learn that lesson young. Others never learn it at all. Philippe placed a gentle hand on Aisha's shoulder. Would you like me to assign another server to this table? He asked quietly, giving her an out if she wanted it. Aisha shook her head. No, thank you. I can handle it. Besides, she said with a slight smile, I believe in finishing what I start. She turned back to the table, her pen ready. As I was saying, the tasting menu tonight features 7 courses, each paired with a carefully selected wine. Shall I proceed with that? Or would you gentlemen prefer to order a la carte? Khalid looked at his watch, then at Marcus with barely disguised contempt. Actually, I think I'll be leaving. I've suddenly lost my appetite for this celebration. He stood, pulling out his wallet, and placing several $100 bills on the table. For the lady's trouble and time, he said to Aisha. And Marcus, I'll be reconsidering our Dubai project. I don't do business with people who lack basic human decency. What Marcus didn't know, what he was about to discover, would make this evening even more unforgettable. The restaurant's owner, Eleanor Chun, emerged from the private dining area with an elderly gentleman in an impeccably tailored suit. This was Ambassador Ibrahim Osman, one of the most influential diplomats in international trade circles. Aisha, the ambassador called warmly in Arabic. Ibnashii, Kaifa haluk? My daughter, how are you? Aisha's professional demeanor softened into a genuine smile. Baba, Lamakun Alam Anaka Sadakin Huna Al Layla. Dad, I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The waitress he'd just insulted was the daughter of Ambassador Osman, the very man whose approval he needed for his next major international deal. The ambassador who had the power to open or close doors across 3 continents. Ambassador Osman's warm expression cooled as he noticed the tension at Marcus's table. He'd been in diplomacy too long not to recognize the aftermath of an incident. His eyes moved from his daughter's composed face to the uncomfortable men seated around the table, finally settling on Marcus, whose face had gone from red with embarrassment to pale with horror. Eleanor Chun, who had been walking beside the ambassador, also sensed something was wrong. She was a shrewd businesswoman who'd built Le Chateau from nothing into one of the city's premier dining destinations. Her sharp eyes took in the scene. The bills on the table, the empty chair where Khalid had been sitting, and most tellingly, the rigid posture of her star employee. Is there a problem here? Eleanor asked, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable authority. She hadn't become successful by being oblivious to tension in her establishment. Before anyone could answer, the ambassador moved closer to the table. He recognized Marcus immediately. They'd met twice before at international business conferences. Mr. Auraman, he said, his tone carefully neutral. What an unexpected coincidence. I wasn't aware you dined here. Marcus stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his wine glass. Ambassador Osman, what a pleasure. His voice cracked slightly. The weight of his situation was crushing him. This wasn't just about a ruined dinner anymore. The ambassador controlled contracts worth hundreds of millions across the Middle East and North Africa. One word from him could destroy Marcus's expansion plans entirely. The ambassador raised his hand, silencing him. He turned to Aisha, switching to English so everyone could understand. Habibdi, tell me what happened here. And please be honest. You know I value truth above all else. Aisha hesitated, glancing at her father and then at Marcus. Despite everything, there was no malice in her eyes, only a quiet resignation. It's nothing I haven't experienced before, Baba. Just another reminder that some people judge books by their covers. That's not an answer, the ambassador said gently but firmly. Eleanor runs an exceptional establishment. If something occurred that made you uncomfortable, she deserves to know. And so do I. Richard, showing more courage than he displayed all evening, spoke up. Ambassador, your daughter handled a difficult situation with remarkable grace and professionalism. She was disrespected by someone at this table, and she responded with dignity and intelligence that put us all to shame. He deliberately didn't look at Marcus, but everyone knew whom he meant. Eleanor's expression hardened. Disrespected how? She demanded. She'd hired Aisha specifically because of her qualifications and had watched her transform their approach to international clientele. The young woman had become invaluable to the restaurant's reputation. David added quietly. Comments were made in Arabic, assuming she wouldn't understand. Insulting comments about her service, her qualifications, even her right to work in an establishment like this. The ambassador's jaw tightened. He'd spent 40 years fighting against exactly this kind of prejudice. The assumption that language created a barrier that allowed people to demean others freely. He'd taught his daughter 6 languages not just for career opportunities, but to ensure she could always understand what was being said about her and defend herself. "I see," the ambassador said slowly. He turned to Marcus, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Mr. Auermann, you and I were scheduled to meet next month regarding the port expansion project. I believe that meeting is no longer necessary." Marcus felt the floor drop out from beneath him. The port expansion project was a $300 million deal that would establish his company as a major player in Mediterranean shipping. Without the ambassador's backing, the entire project would collapse. "Ambassador, please, if I could just explain." "Explain what?" The ambassador interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "That you spoke words you didn't mean? That you're only sorry because you were caught? Or perhaps that you believe apologizing erases the contempt you showed my daughter?" He shook his head. "I've learned over decades that character revealed in private moments is the truest character of all. You've shown me exactly who you are, Mr. Auermann." "Mr. Auermann," the ambassador said quietly, switching back to English. "I believe you've met my daughter. She works here during her gap year before starting her PhD program. She believes in understanding all aspects of business, including service industry perspectives." Eleanor, the restaurant owner, added with a knowing look, "Aisha is actually our consultant for Middle Eastern client relations. She works tables to better understand customer service. She's transformed our entire approach." Marcus sat frozen, calculating the damage. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was about reputation, business relationships, and the very real consequences of casual cruelty. Khalid had already pulled out his phone, likely reconsidering their partnership. Aisha looked at her father, then at Marcus. "Dignity isn't determined by job titles or bank accounts. It's revealed by how we treat people we think can't affect us. Tonight, you showed who you are when you thought no one important was watching." She turned to the ambassador. "I'll send someone else to handle this table. They deserve service as courteous as they've been." The slight emphasis on the last word landed like a verdict. As Aisha walked away with her head high, Marcus realized the most expensive lesson of his life had just cost him nothing monetarily, but everything professionally. The $50 million celebration had become a career-defining disaster, all because he'd forgotten one simple truth. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their position. The ambassador watched his daughter leave, pride evident in his eyes despite his anger at the situation. He turned back to Marcus with the measured gaze of someone who'd negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements across continents. "You know what troubles me most, Mr. Auermann? Not that you harbor these prejudices. Sadly, I've encountered that throughout my career. What troubles me is your cowardice in expressing them only when you believe yourself safe from consequences." Eleanor crossed her arms, her business instincts now fully engaged. "Ambassador, I assure you this behavior doesn't reflect the values of Le Chateau. Mr. Auermann, I'm going to have to ask you to settle your bill and leave. We reserve the right to refuse service, and I'm exercising that right now." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Everything was spiraling out of control. "Please, let me make this right. I'll donate to any charity the ambassador chooses. I'll buy your way out of accountability," the ambassador finished coldly. "That's exactly what I'd expect. You believe everything has a price, including redemption. He straightened his tie with deliberate precision. Here's what's going to happen. That port expansion project you wanted, I'll be recommending the Mansor Group instead. They've been respectful partners for years. Richard stood up, distancing himself physically from Marcus. Ambassador, for what it's worth, several of us at this table are horrified by what occurred. I hope you won't judge all of us by one man's failures. The ambassador nodded slightly. I appreciate that, Mr. Harrison. Character is individual, not collective. But I'd suggest you choose your business associates more carefully in the future. A man who treats service workers with contempt will eventually treat partners the same way when he believes he has the upper hand. David also stood, pulling out his business card. Ambassador, if your daughter ever needs professional references or connections in the tech industry, please have her contact me. The world needs more people who stand up for themselves with her level of grace. Meanwhile, other diners in the restaurant had witnessed enough to understand the situation. A prominent businesswoman from a nearby table approached Eleanor. I saw what happened. That young woman handled herself beautifully. You're lucky to have her on your team. Word was already spreading through the restaurant like ripples in water. Phones were discreetly raised. Messages were being typed. In the age of social media and instant communication, Marcus's humiliation wouldn't stay confined to this dining room. By morning, the story would be circulating through business networks, not as gossip, but as a cautionary tale. Marcus remained seated, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a costume, his watch heavy on his wrist. All the symbols of success he'd accumulated meant nothing now. He'd climbed so high, only to discover that the view from the top meant nothing if you trampled people to get there. The ambassador prepared to leave, but paused. You know what my daughter learned working here, Mr. Auermann? That humanity exists at every level of society. The chef who creates art on plates, the server who anticipates needs before they're spoken, the person who cleans tables at midnight. They all have dreams, struggles, and dignity. She learned that lesson. Perhaps one day you will too, though I suspect tonight's consequences won't teach you what simple decency should have. As the ambassador walked away to find his daughter, Marcus sat alone at a table set for celebration. His remaining colleagues gathered their belongings in uncomfortable silence. The $50 million deal he'd toasted earlier now felt meaningless. He'd gained wealth, but revealed bankruptcy of character. And in a single evening, a young woman with a notepad and perfect Arabic had taught him that real power isn't bought. It's earned through how we treat every person we encounter, regardless of who we think they are. Sometimes the universe delivers justice in the most unexpected languages, and sometimes the most profound lessons come from the people we mistakenly believe have nothing to teach us. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.